Bienvenidos, señoras y señores, to another episode of the Bleed Lows podcast. This episode of the Bleed Lows podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines and the latest matchup reports for this year's NBA playoffs. BetOnline is your sports intel headquarters this season, as we have you covered on all your insider sports wagering needs, from basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, golf, to UFC and boxing. It's the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your home. So get into the action today, head over to the website, or use your mobile device to join, and be sure to use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, to receive your 50% bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. And joining us on the carne asada is one of our favorite columnists. The guy is just killing it in the game. He is the Guillermo Shakespeare of the LA Times. He is the Puerto Rican Duke by way of Massachusetts. Jorge Castillo. Jorge, ¿cómo estás, amigo?
Todo bien, gracias. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Always good to be on with you.
Jorge, so I think you've been on a roll lately. You wrote 3 columns that I think are really good, so I want to spend the time talking to you about those columns. With the Red Sox, or as other people have called the Boston Dodgers, recently making a West Coast trip, it looks like you were able to spend some time with some former Dodgers. So I wanted to start off first with the Justin Turner column that you wrote. But I'm going to preface this by this, because you wrote this great line in the Kenley Jansen article that to me clearly defines what this is about. And I want to give you credit for it. The business of baseball has a way of snuffing out its romanticism. And that, to me, it's such a great line. And it's the theme of everything that you wrote on these articles. So going back to Justin Turner, your article mentioned it. He was on the radio last year after the end of the season, basically laying out, hey, I want to be the Dodger. I want to be a Dodger, and basically putting it on the Dodgers' lap, right? But I got to ask you this. He said he wanted the deal done and he wanted to re-sign with the Dodgers, and he had no clue what happened. Was he being naive there, or is this just him covering himself?
It's probably, covering himself, to be honest. It came down to this. The Dodgers wanted to give him a 1-year deal about what they gave JD Martinez. He wanted more, and he got more. It just came down to that. And we can get into why the Dodgers just wanted to give a 1-year deal to a DH. I think that has to do with their plans for this next winter. We can talk about that later on. But I think Justin Turner wanted more than a 1-year deal, knowing that this probably is the last contract of his career, right? If you go at this stage of your career, if you go 1 year, 1 year at a time, there's no guaranteeing that by the time you finish that year, someone else is going to give you another good contract, right? He's 38 years old. So the Dodgers wanted to give him a 1-year deal. They did not really, like I said, the romanticism of this is, Justin Turner is a Dodger. It's still weird to me. When I was at Fenway in that clubhouse, it was strange to me that he was there. It's strange to me that he's not on the Dodgers. He was embedded in this community. He was embedded on that team, fan favorite, 9 years, et cetera, and I think in a perfect world where we kind of stick to, that guy should be a Dodger, just like Derek Jeter should be. I'm not comparing Justin Turner to Derek Jeter, but, Derek Jeter's a Yankee, and so on and so forth. Aaron Judge is now a Yankee for the rest of his career. I think that's I think it's great as a fan, right? When you grow up, kid, there are guys that you idolize and guys you want to play like, and I wear his number and I play his position and all that stuff. And I think there's probably thousands of kids, in this area, in this region, that think about Justin Turner in that way. But the Dodgers are in the business to win. They made the calculations. They looked at their projections, the computer, their models. They saw with their eyes, maybe, hey, Justin Turner's bat's getting a little slower. We'd rather have a JD Martinez, who's, a little younger, but, had the same question marks going down the stretch last year. We'd rather have him at 1 year and $10 million than giving Justin Turner a 2-year deal. So that's basically what it came down to, right? You would hope that I think ideally that Justin Turner would have been a Dodger for the rest of his career. I think he obviously wanted to do that. I think the Dodgers would have preferred that, but they decided the best way to construct this team this year was to have JD Martinez.
So, is the timing right? In your article, you mentioned that basically the next day he decided to go with Boston. So, obviously, the Red Sox were talking to him, right? So, he was trying to draw out the clock then to try to going on the radio basically was trying to apply pressure to the Dodgers, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. Just get it out there that I want to be a Dodger. I'm a fan. He knows he's a fan favorite. He knows where he stands, right? So just
Yeah.
you go out there and you say, "Hey, I want to be a Dodger. This isn't about me not wanting to come back." Yeah, and we actually drew like think about his last free agency. He didn't sign till like a few days before spring training. I think it was a
Yeah.
2-year deal or something like that. So that this had been drawn out before. Obviously, he was younger. The Dodgers were at like a different stage in terms of like their construction of the team and so on and so forth. But you obviously as a free agent, he said it to me. I'm 38 years old. I had to start talking to the other teams. I can't just wait. There's only so many jobs out there. It's like musical chairs. You gotta go sit somewhere. If not, you're gonna be left out. So he was talking to other teams. Kike obviously was recruiting him, and it became this whole thing where a bunch of people started recruiting him. The whole Boston sports community came in and sort of started recruiting him, and then Kenley signs with them, and then Turner follows. And I think that's smart. It's due diligence. It's like, think about it. You can't wait for a job offer in any field, right? You can't just wait, and then you're like, oh wait, well now no one else wants me. You have to take the job when you can. And it was at Chris Taylor's wedding when he saw that JD Martinez signed with the Dodgers, and the next day he was a member of the Boston Red Sox.
I gotta ask you this because I know he's a paisano of yours, but is Kike Hernandez becoming a villain now? Because I think he's the one who destroyed Cody Bellinger's career with the celebration, and now he's recruiting guys to leave the Dodgers. I thought it was great. Again, check out this piece; it's a wonderful insight there. I mean, it was no joke. I mean, it was on purpose, right? Hey, Kike, call Turner. I mean, the minute the Red Sox probably heard Turner on the radio, right? Or probably before then, right? It's like, Kike, we need you to recruit Turner.
Yeah, and I talked to Chaim Bloom for the story too, and they were looking for a DH who could play some first base, and JD Martinez didn't do that. So that's why like the swap became it was kind of a swap, right? It was a
Yeah.
swap. Justin Turner's playing a lot of first base for the Red Sox. JD Martinez does not play first base. So that's basically what they wanted. They were in the market for, and Justin Turner kind of fits the bill, right? He's a right-handed hitter. They wanted a right-handed hitter who could play some first base. Professional. He's batting, second, third for him. He's up there in the batting order. A professional at bat, as they say, right? A guy who's always going to produce. He's producing still. Again, he's 38 and he's still producing. So that's what they were in the market for, right? So yeah, you kind of, if you want the guy, you put a little full court press on him. He wasn't. The Red Sox weren't the only team out there. I think he had 4 offers. The Marlins were in on him. So, yeah, you get Kike to start recruiting, and you get Trevor Story to recruit. And hey, Bill Belichick, can you send him a text? Sure, I can do that for you. And Jason Varitek and Dustin Pedroia and all that stuff. So I'm sure it's flattering, right? No matter what you've done in your career, to have all these people come out and reach out to you and try to tell you, hey, we would love to have you, and it worked. And there are worse places to be than playing for the Boston Red Sox. It's a storied franchise, and they're not necessarily gonna, going into the season, they weren't World Series contenders like they have often been, but so far I think they're probably playing a little better than people expected.
So, Jorge, if the Dodgers didn't have Federico at first, is there a chance then that Justin Turner still is a Dodger, and that the Dodgers are doing what the Red Sox are doing, and they'll move Justin Turner over to first?
Sure. Now, if they don't have Freddie Freeman, if they didn't sign Freddie Freeman, last year they trade for Juan Soto. Like, I don't know, it's like that's a whole like domino effect of like what possibilities are, and maybe he is playing first base for him, or maybe they get somebody else to play first base. But sure, I guess in a vacuum, if Freddie Freeman wasn't around, I think Justin Turner does make more sense to play some first base. Or Max Muncy at first base and Miguel Vargas at third, and then somebody else at second. Right? It's just a whole kind of like a domino effect. But I think just circumstances. The Dodgers, There's a certain guy who's going to be a free agent next winter who, pitches and does some DH on the side. And, if you're going to be in that market, you do not want to tie up that position for next year. And I think that's what it comes down to. I don't think 2 years, $21 million is really the issue for the Dodgers. They can pay it. Mark, the owner of the team, I'm blanking on his name.
Mark Walters.
Yeah, Mark. Yeah, there he is. Him. He's putting 8-figure investments in squash right now. They have money. There's no issue with the money. It's a matter of Shohei Ohtani's a free agent next year, and he's a DH when he's not pitching. So why would you tie up that position?
It's interesting that because in your article you mentioned 2 years ago it was kind of the same situation, right? I think Justin Turner wanted more years, and they ended up with that 2-year deal. And you mentioned earlier, and I think this is what the heart of your article is about, in that is taking the emotion out of this and making strictly a baseball decision. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jorge, but I don't think the Dodgers make bad deals. I feel like the Dodgers make the deal that's best for them, and they really don't care about the player. And that's where the fans, I think, need to realize it's like, do you want to win? What is more important to you, to win or to keep these guys? And then later on, you're going to bitch and moan to the team, hey, you guys aren't making the right decisions. I mean, when it happened 2 years ago with Justin Turner, was it just that the Dodgers were ahead of this and they knew, hey, look, this is what's coming. Your numbers aren't what they were before, and we're not going to pay. We're not going to overpay for you.
Yeah, I mean, the Dodgers, it's been proven the last decade with Andrew Friedman, 9 years, I think it is with him now, where it's going to be 9 years. They win deals more often than they lose. They lost on deals. There's no doubt about it. They often win, though. They win trades. They win, Freddie Freeman on that contract. That's an amazing contract for a guy who's producing the way he's producing. And he fell on their lap, just like Mookie Betts fell on their laps. That trade, first of all, let's do the trade with the Reds that led to that trade. You trade Puig and Kent for 2 prospects, one of whom is shipped out in that Mookie Betts trade. Another guy, Josiah Gray, who helps you get Trey Turner and Max Scherzer. These guys, they win deals. But you're right. If you're a fan, you're like, no, but I like that guy. I like Cody. Cody was hitting 180 all last year, and he got the loudest cheers at Dodger Stadium, besides like Julio and Clayton. Like, it doesn't. People like him, And at the end of the day, this is entertainment, right? So, like, if we like a guy, like, oh, why is my main character, one of the main characters in this like play that I'm watching, this movie story, whatever, he's not there anymore. That kind of sucks. But people are going to keep going to the play, to the movie if it's good. They're going to go to the sequel if it's good again. Like, they're going to keep going. And the Dodgers know that, so the best way to keep fans coming is to win. So, and the Dodgers are winning again. They're going into the season. It was, are the Dodgers going to be as good as the Padres? And well, they're way better. At least, as of Saturday, May 27th, they're a really good team again. So, it's a proven track record. They win. They make good decisions. They're not perfect by any means. They make mistakes, but in this case, again, like, you can't, when they make this decision, you can't fault them. You got to be like, all right, well, there's a reason why they're doing it, and you have to look at the history and be like, all right, they're probably making the right decision, right? Or at least not a terrible one.
So I'm curious if you got a chance to talk to him about this, but right after it was announced that he was signing with the Red Sox, he got asked about the Alex Cora situation. And this goes back to the 2017 World Series. Recently, Correa came to Dodger Stadium and the boos were heard very loudly and frequently. Obviously, Dodger fan has not forgotten about this, but it seems like the players are able to put this behind them, because there's a few Dodger players from that 2017 team playing for Cora. So if the players are putting this behind them, I mean, shouldn't the fans put it behind them? I mean, were you able to ask him how he dealt with that Cora situation? Do we know for a fact that they had a conversation about what happened in the 2017 World Series?
So I actually did not talk to him about that specifically, but he did go out his way to say that, Alex Cora like recruited him and he likes playing for him. And Kenley was really, really went out his way to say how he loves playing for Alex Cora. He's a great manager, players guy. So based on that, again, like I didn't ask that specifically. I was more caught up in the Dodger stuff, and um, it does seem like they don't really, care as much as they at least they used to, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the conversations were had, and I'm sure you have to have that conversation when you're going to go work for somebody, right? You're like, hey, I'm going to go play for you. Kenley still thinks Kenley made the joke. I was talking to him. I was like, yeah, you guys won a World Series. He's like, well, we should have won too. So it's still on his brain, right? The idea that they feel cheated.
Yeah.
But he's also playing for a guy who, at the end of the day, was one of the fall guys. You can call him the scapegoat if you want. I think people around the league, around baseball, kind of view it like, hey, they're blaming everything on Score and Carlos Beltran. There wasn't nobody else involved. These are the only two guys. So there's probably some of that sentiment as well. Like they weren't the only guys who, they were the fall guys, the scapegoats, I guess, in a way. But they still cheated, and I'm sure the conversations were had, and the opportunity to play for the Boston Red Sox and play for Cora, who by all means across baseball, people seem to really like the guy. I think they were able to put it behind him. Now, as for the fan thing, part of being a fan is kind of like there's like irrational stuff. You just think certain things, and have strong opinions, and it's kind of like just how it is, right? It's part of like the whole dynamic of being a fan and having a team and so on and so forth. And I think that's what makes this stuff a little more fun, right? The certain fans hate certain players, or not hate or dislike them, teams and all that stuff. So you would think, it's been 5 years. I think the thing with Correa is a little different because he was so outspoken after it happened that I think he kind of, he put a bullseye on himself, a target on his own back, right? So whereas the other guys who were in it, I don't know, do you really care about? Altuve still gets booed, but I don't know, whatever. Like, I feel like Correa was like the face of it. He became the face of it voluntarily, and I think that's why the sort of the hate is still there, so strong. 5-6 years later.
I want to ask you one last thing on Justin Turner. When he left, everybody was like, the Dodgers, they're losing a leader. They're losing a leader, and I think everybody looks at it now. This is Mookie and Federico's team, and those guys aren't like, you don't see it on them as being leaders. But I want to ask you this, the influence that Justin Turner maybe might have had on a guy like Will Smith, because after what happened in Atlanta between him and Ozuna, I feel like Will Smith's a soft-spoken guy, but I think Will Smith has become a leader in that same vein as Turner, in the sense that it's his play and what he does on the field. That's leadership. Am I wrong there?
Yeah, he's also a catcher, right? So the idea he's kind of involved in every play, and he's becoming a star. He's probably one of the best players in baseball who hasn't been an all-star, right? He probably should be an all-star here if he stays healthy. Guys have to step into that vacuum. Obviously, Mookie and Freddie are different kinds of leaders. Mookie's not the most outspoken. I don't think Freddie is either, right? Kershaw talked about maybe being more of a leader now. It's kind of weird as a starting pitcher. You only play every 5 days, but guys have to step into that, into that void. And Will Smith is a good candidate. He's soft spoken, but he's really good, and he's been around for a bit here. When you think about it, he's one of the longest tenured Dodgers, which is kind of strange to think about. Feels like he just came up yesterday, but. Someone has to step into that void. And now that's like the whole leadership. I find the whole idea of leadership very fascinating in any aspect. Like, what is a leader in anything? In baseball versus another sport versus another field, industry, whatever. Like, there are different ways to be a leader. There's examples. There's kind of being the rah-rah guy. There's taking guys, maybe mentoring a couple guys or one guy strongly, and there's different ways of doing it. And the Dodgers right now, I think it's 10 games over 500. They're doing just fine as of right now, right? With the leadership and everything else. So I think over time, guys will step up, and they'll figure it out.
I want to move over to Kenley Jansen, because I found you had a lot of good tidbits on that piece with Kenley Jansen. And so Kenley recently joined the 400 Save Club, and a newest member and favorite punching bag of former Dodger fans, Craig Kimbrell, just joined. So now there are 8 guys. Before it was 7. And I think it was half of those guys are in the Hall of Fame. So I got to ask you this, the argument, now that he's in that club, when there's a club that there's less than double digits in it, Does this? I mean, is he a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I don't know the answer, to be honest. There's one guy right now, Billy Wagner, who
Mhm.
is getting some love for Hall of Fame. It'd be interesting to see if he gets in. Now, if he gets in, then I think we see these other guys. There's more of an argument for him. Kenley Jansen, like, there's different ways to look at a career, right? There's peak longevity. Kenley Jansen's peak was he was the best reliever in baseball for 2 years there, right? At least 2 years, if not more. But those 2 years were he was so dominant. Then he has the longevity aspect of it. He's still a closer at 35 years old, 400 saves, 401, I think it is now. Doing it on his third team. It's going to be fascinating because I think we're seeing now we're starting pitchers. The wins don't matter as much, and I think we're seeing now that the closer is kind of not the same as it used to be maybe 10, 20 years ago. The idea of a closer. The Dodgers, for example, don't have a closer. They don't think it's like oh yeah, you need to be the closer type of thing. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see over the next 5, 10 years when Kenley goes on the ballot after he retires, what we think about closers and what we think about the save. It's going to be fascinating. But if closers are going to get into the Hall of Fame, if we're going to have Billy Wagner in there, then I think you need to have Kenley Jansen in there, right? He's one of the best to ever do it. And obviously Mariano Rivera and Trevor Hoffman, I think they're in a class of their own. So it's like this next sort of tier. Do we find them to be Hall of Fame worthy? I think that's going to be interesting. I think Billy Wagner is a good test case for that.
Yeah, that's the name that always seems to come up of that list of those 8 guys on there, which I feel like, hey man, John Franco was pretty good in his day, and I feel like he gets like no love anymore. But Billy Wagner is the one that constantly of that list. If you're going to put one in, it's Billy Wagner. So I am curious. I loved your piece in the fact that you disclosed that Justin Turner had presented Kenley Jansen a video, and a lot of former Dodgers were in that video congratulating him with his 400 save. It makes me think of I hear Charles Barkley always bitch and moan about these guys are too friendly with each other because back in the 80s everybody was a mortal enemy. Like everybody forgets the fact that Magic and Isaiah kissed on half court. I mean, this whole idea of even though we're not on the same team, we can still root for each other. That should not be that controversial of a topic, right?
No, not at all. I mean, Kenley Jansen was minor league teammates with Kelly. I mean, these guys like it's one thing to work with someone. Like it's hard to relate to this, right? We work with people and we become closer coworkers. These guys basically live with each other. It's like 8 months of like just being constantly around each other. In this sport more than any other. It's constant road trips. It's spring training. It's the playoffs. It's like these guys are around each other all the time. So it's only it's only natural that these guys become close. Now, if you like them, now there are a lot of guys that don't like each other. Let's not pretend or don't care for each other or indifferent. But Kenley Jansen is a guy who I think was really liked. He's a nice guy. He's a really nice guy, and I think it was shown in that video. Guys, a lot of people came out and spoke to him, and through that video. And Clay and Kershaw, their relationship goes back now. I think it's like 16, 17 years, whatever it is. So it's a long time. And I don't see anything wrong with it. And Austin Barnes in that video, he was just catcher for a long time. And I think it's cool to see. It just shows you the human side of this. It's a part that a lot of people don't see is these guys are constantly around each other. They're friends. They become friends. You kind of have to become friends. It's going to be kind of a miserable experience. So I thought it was cool to see that whole video. He had family from like Curacao. Andrew Jones is in the video, different teammates. Russell Martin, Eric Gagne was in it. So it was cool to see, and it just shows you the connection, and that's really what the kind of when I saw that video, it's like, yeah, there's still a connection there. He's always going to be a Dodger. He can finish with the Red Sox and do this and that. He can win a World Series this year or next year, but Los Angeles, right, it's still home for him. His family's here. He lives here year round. This is always going to be home for him, even if he doesn't wear a Dodger uniform again. And in 15, 20 years, 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to see him at Dodger Stadium when he's like, oh, well, everybody welcome Kenley Jansen. He's going to be there and everyone's going to go crazy. And they're going to forget the times that he blew the saves and didn't look great and blah, blah, blah. That's just how it works.
And that I give you your kudos, man, as a writer, because You had mentioned the human side, and I think that's what your pieces did here with Justin Turner. It humanized Justin Turner in the sense that that's what he wanted. He wanted to stay with the Dodgers, but reality is something different. And with Kenley Jansen, I thought you did a wonderful job of humanizing him too, because how accurate or how close was a possible reunion with the Dodgers after that season in Atlanta? Was there an
Uh,
actual chance that he would re-sign with them?
no, no, 0% chance. And I think he knew that. So I think whereas last year, and I went to, I mean, the day he signed with the Braves, I flew to the day after I flew to Florida to go talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think there was a sense of shell shock still, like the fact that he wasn't going to be a Dodger, and it's only natural, you know. And he was talking about how great it was to be a Brave because he grew up, you know, watching the Braves on television, and Andrew Jones, one of the, you know, the first star from Curaçao to play, and Ozzy Albies was on the team, another guy from Curaçao, like, but it's still, it's like you can, you know, he preferred to be a Dodger. He preferred that's where his comfort zone was. Now I think this year, I'm talking to him, I think he's at peace with the fact he's not going to play for the Dodgers again. I think he knew that going into the offseason. He said it. He's like, I went into this offseason neutral. Like whatever, best offer, best team, blah, blah, blah. And the Dodgers, I remember asking Andrew Fried, I remember asking somebody if there was a chance that Kenley would come back, and it just was it was a zero. It wasn't going to happen. They went into the offseason like saying, we don't need a closer. They came out of out of the offseason without a closer, out of spring training without a closer. They don't really have one now. So it was never a priority for him. I think Kenley was comfortable with it. I don't know. He came to terms with it. And it was never going to happen. Now, last year I thought, hey, you know, it's a 1-year deal. Kenley, if he still has it, maybe he comes back. But yeah, that didn't happen.
You know, you mentioned when he came back that first season with the Braves, there were a mixed reaction. I felt in the stadium. There was a spattering of boos, and I feel you mentioned it. I think a lot of people think of those blown saves, think of his performance in the 2020 World Series. Did the Dodgers? In your article, they mentioned something about the mental lapses. Was that a real narrative, or is that something the Dodgers wanted to put out there to justify their reasons for moving on from him?
No, I think their reasoning for moving on from him was they didn't want to pay that much for a closer, or at least give him the years. And also last year, I don't want to go with like in the weeds here, but there was some timing issues there. I think they wanted Kenley back, and they ended up with Kimbrel, who was around the same price, but you know, it was just a timing thing going on with the Freddie Freeman situation. It was just kind of a lot going on. So, you know, I think he just had he had lapses. There were times where he was throwing 91. There were other times he was throwing 95. It was just start to start. It was mostly just everyone said it, the Dodgers and himself. You know, a lot of like mechanical issues. Like sometimes he just wasn't synced up. It's like a thing that was talked about a lot, and he talked about it actually when I was in Boston. He had blown a couple saves there, and he just didn't look the same. I mean, the night he got his 400 save, he was throwing 99 miles an hour, which I don't think anyone's ever seen. So he still has it now. You know, I just think it's a matter of, the Dodgers want. I don't think there's any of that going on. I think it's just a matter of he had his lapses. I think it was obvious. There were times there, 2020 he didn't close out the World Series. There was the time in 2019 against the Nationals he wasn't on the mound, and Joe Kelly was on the mound and gave up the grand slam. Like the Dodgers had their times where they just didn't trust him. Yeah, it just. But at the end of the day, you know, people booing Kenley Jansen or anyone who's been around, you know, for 10, 12 years with your favorite team and was part of a team that won a World Series and went to a couple others and, you know, had so much success. I think it's kind of strange to boo a guy like that who wanted to come back, who still lives here, and during the off season. I mean, fans are fans though, right? We were just talking about, you know, irrational you can get and all that. But a guy who's never said anything bad, you know, really about anyone. So I find that to be kind of strange. But the Red Sox won't be coming here. The Dodgers will be going there for Mookie Betts' return. So that'll be another thing. But it would be interesting to see next time Kenley comes back if it's a little different.
That sequence, by the way, when you were describing him getting hitting 99, that's just great writing, man. It really put me there. I felt like I was in that game, especially the back and forth between Kika and Justin. So kudos to you on that. One last thing on Jansen, which I thought was really interesting in your article, in the sense that he was never viewed as a leader with the Dodgers, but with the Bravos and Las Medias Rojas, he was viewed with a leader. Was that just an age thing that now, or is it because he went to a new team that people looked at him differently? And like you mentioned with the Dodgers just seemed to look at Jansen one way, and it never changed. This is who Jansen is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both sides. I think Kenley in this setting viewed himself as a certain, in a certain way. I'm Kenley Jansen. Like I came up as a kid, and I'm viewed in this way. He did mention by the end of this time he was like mentoring a couple guys, Victor Gonzalez, Bruce Agradorol, and stuff like that. But like when you come up and grow up in a setting, maybe like you don't think about like, hey, actually, like, I can take the next step here and be a leader. It doesn't maybe happen. Whereas you go to a different place and people are seeing you from a distance, you're like, oh, this is one of the best coaches ever. I'm going to learn from him. So I'm going to, random reliever is going to go up to you and ask you things. And with the Red Sox, Chaim Bloom mentioned it, Alex Cora mentioned it. He's really become a leader type, not just with relievers, but the clubhouse in general. And when I was in that room in the clubhouse, obviously we want to get like 45 minutes an hour in there, the media. So it's not like I'm getting, I have a huge inside sort of look into this, but it did seem he had a presence in there. He was like the loudest one, and in a good way. He wasn't like obnoxious or anything. He was joking with Devers about the Lakers series, and joking about different things about the Champions League, and he had a presence in there. Whereas with the Dodgers, he had a presence, but it wasn't quite the same. It was more prominent, I think, in at Fenway. And I think it's just a matter of coming to your own, having confidence, and then realizing that other people see you in a certain way when you go to different places, when you're around different guys, younger guys especially, right? Like, oh, you're Kenley Jansen. I remember I saw you when I was in high school or whatever, when I was younger. You were doing amazing stuff, and I want to learn from you. So I think it's just a matter of maturation and growing, and then change of setting.
You had mentioned it. I definitely, when Justin Turner comes back, he's always going to, 10 years from now, whatever, he's always going to be viewed as a Dodger. If Kenley gets into the Hall of Fame, he's probably going in as a Dodger. They're going to retire that 74 up there. And I think people will view Kenley in a much nicer way and be like, of course, he's always been a Dodger. For the most part, I think the Dodgers are pretty good in accepting this their fraternity, so to speak, of former players. You wrote a piece on one of them who was just recently honored by being inducted into the legends of Dodger baseball, Manny Mota. You guys should read the piece alone just for the mango tree story. Again, Jorge, that's just great writing. I have to ask you this, even though he's been with the organization for so long, and they put him in the legends of baseball. I still feel like the Dodgers have taken that dude for granted, and at some point have exploited him. But I'm sure you can say that about many former Dodger players. Am I wrong there? Has Manny Mota really gotten his due?
I don't know. I probably not. I think this gesture was great, to get him, to get him recognized. And one thing that sticks out to me, I've been here in Los Angeles now going on 5 years, is when I got here, still exists to today, right? The history of the team is significant. It's a big part of the Dodger brand. You see there's lots of names, lots of people who come around and all that. But over the last, 5 years, the Dodgers have lost a lot of people. It's Vin Scully, it's Tom Lasorda, it's Don Newcomb, it's Maury Wills, it's Don Sutton. A lot of guys, a lot of history, like connections to the original teams here in Los Angeles, connections to that history, connections to Jackie Robinson. And in Manny Mota, he's one of the guys still around, one of those people still around who is a connection back to that time. Manny Mota, he told me, he met, Jackie Robinson was his favorite player for obvious reasons, right? As a Black Latino guy who broke the color barrier, Jackie Robinson. But he mentioned like meeting him when when he was a player. And then also the thing that stuck, like, it's not a Dodger. It's actually kind of a Dodger thing. Roberto Clemente was a Dodger in the organization once upon a time. That connection, like he was a good friend of Roberto Clemente. Roberto Clemente went to his house in the DR often during the off season. They were like tight. They were like best of friends. He called him a brother. And that to me is just, as a guy, I mean, I'm really into history. Like that's cool. That's just it's pretty amazing, having that connection to the past. And Manny Mota has that. He's beloved by a lot of people in different circles here in Los Angeles to all the way to Dominican Republic. He is a legend down there as well. His time in the Winter League down there with Licey, one of the best teams, franchises in that league and Dominican Winter League. So it's just like he has just a fascinating life, over the decades. And yeah, maybe he doesn't get his due. He wasn't the player that some of these other like legends are. He was never an all-star. He was really never really an everyday player here in Los Angeles, right? He was a pinch hitter extraordinaire, right? A great pinch hitter.
Yeah.
But I think he's a connection to the past, and I think it's good. It's timely. It was good that the Dodgers are great. The Dodgers really recognize him this year because he's one of the few guys still with us who kind of is that connection to the past. And and his son's around now, Jose, with the Dodgers the last couple of years after spending so much time with the Angels. Another guy talking to him, he was in the Dodger clubhouse with his brothers in the 80s, 70s and 80s. So it's really cool to have that connection to the history. I'm really into that stuff. I think it's important. I think it's one of the best. That's what makes baseball a little different than the other sports. Is the history. Sometimes we get caught up a little bit too much in history, right? That's why we don't. Baseball maybe doesn't progress at the speed that a lot of people necessarily want it to. But that history is what makes baseball so it makes it a little different. And it's just cool to have someone like that still around and talking to him. I talked to him for like a couple hours. It was fun just to talk to him.
We just recently had Dave Stewart on the show, and he shared a story with us that when he was playing winter ball over in Licey, he stayed with Manny Mota, and that Manny Mota basically treated him like a son. And he told us the nickname he had was Papa. Everybody called him, Papa. And everybody I know who runs across Manny Mota just has the same stories, that the guy was just so kind to me. And it's just really interesting to me because your article mentioned that, and I don't think this subject is talked about enough. And I mean, you're a history buff, but the dealing with segregation in the South in the minors, for an Afro Latino, I don't know if we've heard that story enough. Like we hear it obviously with African Americans and what they had to go through, but what the Afro Latino had to go through. Do you have any more stories about that?
Well, I think obviously Clemente is the most prominent, maybe Afro Latino of that time at least.
Yeah.
There have been lots of Afro Latinos who come through, who've done great things in baseball, and Clemente is so famous and revered nowadays. There was a story of, if I recall correctly, I actually wrote this a few years ago for Roberto Clemente. There was a story where he was with the Pittsburgh Pirates, obviously, and they were somewhere in the South, and they weren't like getting served, or they weren't allowed in the restaurant, and there was something along the lines of like he stood up. I don't know. He just basically stood up for himself, and he talked about it. Clemente. He talked about being black in the U.S. and there's racism everywhere. There's racism in Latin America. There's racism in the DR and Puerto Rico, everywhere. But I think it was a little different when you get here. You're not allowed in like certain restaurants. It's just different. And Manny Mota Jose Mota told me a couple stories. He relayed a couple stories to me about his dad, and how they had one day like they weren't allowed in a restaurant, so they had to eat like in a trailer when he was in the minor leagues and stuff like that. And it's just another layer to this. I think people just kind of like, oh, he's Latino. Well, he was
Right.
a black Latino. Like when he's walking down the street, he's not like, oh, he's Dominican. No, he's a black guy. That's just the way it is. And there's definitely a layer there. Clemente really was outspoken about that. And obviously, when you're black and then you don't speak the language, or you're not as comfortable in the language, that adds more difficulties to the situation. And these guys, just they dealt with a lot. Manny Motas of the world, and Orlando Cepeda and Tony Perez and Roberto Clemente, like guys who Afro Latinos who came up during that time, for sure.
I mean, you mentioned it already in your piece. This guy, Manny Mota, was a lifetime 304 hitter, and the majority of the time he was doing it pinch hitting. And that to me is just a crazy stat to be a career 304 hitter, just pinch hitting. The humanitarian work that he still does. That do you think that was an influence of Clemente, or that's who Manny Mota was?
Probably both, right? The idea that you become so close to someone who loses his life helping. But I think Manny Mota was always sort of, even before that, was so kind in talking to him. It seemed like he always had a good head on his shoulders, based talking to other people. The way he's helped. I mean, it's one thing to help like have a foundation and help kids, but the way he helps like Dodgers when they come to the go to the DR and play for Licey, like you mentioned, Dave Stewart, he did with a bunch of other guys. He made sure he took care of them. That stuff that's not like taught. You don't see that stuff. It's not a, it's you don't have to do that. I think he's always just kind of been like that. And someone who grew up poor, single mother, um, someone who would sell stuff, was a street vendor. And that's how his foundation started. Uh, he would just help kids in the neighborhood who were selling stuff and literally just give them food. And from there, it kind of evolved and evolved. And it wasn't really an official organization, I think, till 1991 or something. It was just him gathering equipment, clothes from teammates or gloves, whatever, and sending it down to the DR for the kids down there. He's someone who always had other people in mind. He's very proud to be Dominican. I think he has Dominicans in mind, which is it's funny because being out here in Los Angeles, as Puerto Rican, it's very different. It's a different
Yeah,
world out here.
yeah.
And he kind of that's another fascinating aspect of it. He's very much a Los Angeles person, but also very much a Dominican. You don't see a lot of Dominicans out here, but he never forgot where he came from. And he made the DR his home during the off season, all those years playing down there, managing down there, and helping down there. And I think that's huge. He's when you think about it, he's one of the first like prominent Dominican baseball players. There've been a lot over the years. There were prominent guys before him, and he had a lot of contemporaries, the Alou brothers and Marichal and all that. But he was part of that wave. Like now we kind of take it for granted. Dominicans play baseball, but back
Right.
then it wasn't like they were everywhere. Playing baseball. So he was part of that movement. He in making baseball down there. I wouldn't say he like made it like important, but he was part of that movement that really popularized the game and made it more accessible to people down there.
He is the author of one of my favorite quotes, Manny Mota. When you describe why nothing in baseball makes sense, and this quote is much better in Spanish than it is in English, but he goes, El béisbol es raro, porque es una bola redonda, pero viene en una caja cuadrada. And if you don't, the loose translation is baseball is very strange. It's a round ball that comes in a square box. And I think that perfectly defines what baseball is. Now, Jorge, I want to thank you for your time. I just want to leave you with this because I want to get your opinion on this. Bad Bunny taking those bumps in the WWE on that pay-per-view in Puerto Rico. I don't know if you saw that, but how did his people allow him to do that? I mean, the dude went through a table.
I mean, I definitely saw it. I mean, I think everybody I think every Latino at this point in the world has seen footage of that. My parents were sending me stuff and all that. Yeah, I'm sure because he wants to do it. He's the guy, if he wants to do something, he wants to do it. It seems like he's a huge wrestling fan. So, that was cool to see. I was with actually some friends, my wife. We didn't watch it live. We went back to watch it on YouTube, and the entrance and all that was awesome. As a Puerto Rican, that was pretty cool to see all the flags and stuff, and then he comes into his own song. But that was cool to see. The guy's everywhere. He has an agency now in baseball. He's at the Met Gala. He's at F1 event in Monaco, I think. Monaco, whatever how you say it, Monaco. The other day, a couple of days ago. Yeah, he's kind of everywhere. He's in movies. That guy is everywhere. But it was cool to see. And Damian Priest, man, shout out to that guy because he's Puerto Rican too, and he lost, and he took that like a champ, man. Like obviously he trains with. I was reading up that he helped train Bad Bunny for that event. So shout out to that guy. Like it must suck, like having to take the L and be the villain and all that stuff. So that was a cool event. That was a cool event. I saw like broke like viewership records for Backlash
Yeah.
and whatever. And I used to be a wrestling buff, man. I fell off. Like my dad made me stop watching wrestling when I was 11 because we got a little crazy with it. So I used to be a huge wrestling guy, but it's cool to see. It's cool to see WWE down there.
Who were your who were your favorites when you were
Oh
11
man,
years old
just
watching
yeah,
wrestling?
yeah. Oh man, so the funny thing is, like, everybody goes to Blockbuster back in the day to rent movies. I went to go rent fucking old Royal Rumble and Summer Slams. I would watch stuff like before. So like my first favorite wrestler was the Ultimate Warrior.
Uh-huh.
And then I was a really big Davey Boy Smith British Bulldog fan. And then the guy I think was really who resonated the most was Shawn Michaels. I was a big Shawn Michaels guy. Going back to when he was with Marty Jannetty,
Oh, the Rockers did.
the Rockers, yeah, man. Like that was before I was born, but I would watch the tapes, and when he put him through the glass at the barbershop and all that stuff. Like that's just, to me, that sticks in my mind. We played all the video games, and we had all the little figures in the ring, and yeah, I was doing moves. I had little cousins. I grew up with a couple of little cousins. We had them. We were doing all the moves, suplexes, and everything on them. So I had to stop watching it. But those three were my favorite wrestlers, man. I was really big into it. And then my dad, at around 11, 12 years old, was like, yeah, me and my brother's a year younger than me. He was like, yeah, you guys need to stop. It's getting a little out of hand. So, but yeah, man, it was a big part of my childhood. It's a joke, actually. Every time I go back to Puerto Rico, my family, my grandmothers, they always ask, "You still watch?" I used to call them chapis. I don't know why. I don't even know if it's a word. But yeah, it's always a thing. It was always a thing. I loved it back in the day.
That Shawn Michaels putting Marty Jannetty through the window is epic. Only also because Bobby Heenan had a great call. I don't know if you remember. It's like, oh, did you see that? Jannetty tried to jump out the window. He tried to escape through the window after Michaels had put him through the window. But
yeah, no, yeah. That was funny stuff. For some reason, it's like still embedded like in my mind. I don't know why that scene.
because it's the best. That's why.
Yeah.
Jorge, we can't thank you enough. For those of you, these articles are subscribe to the LA Times, people. Look, I got a subscription for a whole year, $1 a week. I think you guys can afford the $1 a week. Don't spend the money on the coffee. Spend it on journalism. We need to support journalism. You guys want these local teams held accountable. We need journalists, and Jorge is a great columnist, and we can't thank you enough for being so gracious to us and always putting up with our bullshit and coming on the show, man. You're the best. I think you've been on the show most of any of our recurring guests, so thank you very much, Jorge.
No, hey, no, I appreciate you guys having me on so much, and it's great to come on and talk, and it's chill vibe, and I enjoy it, man. Thank you so much for having me.
And there you have it. Thank you, Jorge. Where can they follow you on the social media?
Yeah, just Jorge Castillo on Twitter and on Instagram. I don't tweet as much as I should, man. I need to get on Twitter more. I need to get on there and just like let it loose a little bit, but I don't do that enough. But yeah, Instagram and Twitter, Jorge Castillo.
Hey, as my co-host Alonzo always says, you tweet the right amount, because usually when you do tweet, you always come in with a zinger, like the one you did the other day with the Dodgers playing mind games on the Rays. It really worked out well for them last night.
Yeah, that was a Bill Belichick thing. You sign the guy, the Broncos practice player for the week that you play the Broncos, type of thing. So that was funny.
There you go. So Jorge Castillo, check out his work at the LA Times. He's great. Jorge, thanks again for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And a big thank you once again to Jorge Castillo. Jorge is a friend of the show, and I've lost count how many times he's been on the show, but he's always great when he comes on the show. He never holds back, and I think those articles, to me, were a real representation of the business side of baseball. We talked about it. I think it's always hard, especially with Justin Turner, because he meant so much to the team. But I think what Jorge said, and we didn't get a chance to get into it more in terms of the pursuit of Ohtani, right? But it seems like that Turner deal was set up at least for what we like to hope for, that they're going to go after Otani. Is that how you take it, Babyface?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been hinted at, right? Like all winter, right? Kind of Dodgers didn't do any moves, nothing, and everything that they kind of did was kind of significant going forward. Though nothing's actually ever been said, but like you know that that is the plan. They don't have to say it. Nobody else has to say it. That's the plan. They're going all in on Otani next season, whether they get him or not. Who knows? I mean, obviously, I think they have a great shot, and I think they have a great shot at getting him. And obviously, going, not wanting to give JT an extra year because they know that would tie up the DH spot. Going with JD Martinez 1 year. They know after this 1 year, that's it, and they can slot in Otani in their next year. It's like you said, it's the business, and they have it. They're playing out, season by season, but Dodgers know what's up. They know what's coming up next season, next off season. They know what's coming up the following off season. They have their plan going forward, and we just got to let it play out now.
It's interesting because it's the emotional side of it, right? We love Justin Turner. Justin Turner is a Dodger. Justin Turner's always been, a hero for the Dodgers, right? I mean, he had a pretty bad postseason, last year. But for the most part, he was a postseason. He delivered in the postseason. He was a postseason performer. But if you look at his numbers now, okay, so he's hitting 267. He's got 5 home runs and 19 RBIs. Okay, that's what he's doing with the Medias Rojas. I think if he would have accepted that 1-year deal, Justin Turner's with the Dodgers this year as the DH. But because he wanted, more, and I can't blame him, right? You want to get paid, especially it's to the end of your career. These are going to be the last big paychecks that you're going to get. So Jorge had mentioned it was basically a swap, Justin Turner for JD Martinez. So let's look at JD Martinez's numbers. JD Martinez is hitting 273. JD Martinez has 9 home runs. JD Martinez has 31 RBIs. JD Martinez's numbers are better than Justin Turner. And this is one of the things, again, that I kept that I was stressing with him, and that is the Dodgers win more deals than they lose. So as much as we hate it, like, this doesn't make, why would you do this? Doesn't this kind of prove the Dodgers right in the sense of JD Martinez is more productive than Justin Turner, and you don't have to deal with where we playing him?
Yeah, and he mentioned it. JD's a little bit younger, right? And you kind of knew what you were going to get with JD Martinez, right? You kind of knew he's going to hit. He's like he's one of those hitters, right? He hits right all the time, and he's showing the RBIs, over 30 RBIs to this point, through May. So I mean, yeah, I mean, you can still feel it, right? You feel the void kind of with the leadership, but like, I mean, I don't think that's really affecting that much. Like when we were at the game the other day, right? And they did the military hero of the game, right? And
yeah,
the veteran comes out and they recognize them, and then they walk off the field, and like that's where JT would always be right there to meet him, right? And there's nobody now to do that, right? That kind of sucks. You kind of still wish that somebody maybe would take up that role and kind of go there and show them the support, right?
Yeah,
that's not happening, right? Because JT, and it seems like JT's doing that in Boston, right? He took that over to Boston, but again, that comes down to the players, right? Like the players that are actually want to do that. They can't just say, "Hey, Max Muncy, we want you to do this now," right? It has to be, from the player, right? The player's got to want to care about them. We know that JT is a very community pro guy, right? And he has his foundation and very pro on that stuff. So that's what JT was, but like you said, I mean, JD Martinez has been, a great, I guess, fill-in for that role.
And, he brought up Kenley Jansen. Let's look at what Kenley Jansen is doing right now. So his ERA is 3.68. I think that's a little high for a closer, right? He's got 10 saves. I would take Kenley Jansen in the Dodgers bullpen right now. Would you, Babyface?
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing with Kenley is like, it's kind of like, I guess people expected relievers to like always go out there, be lights out, and and never give up a run, and that's it, right? But that's not the case. That's never going to happen. Now, I guess with a closer though, like nine times out of 10, you want them to save the game, right? And if you start getting down like maybe 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10, then that's not a good closer. And I think that's maybe where people were fearing with Kenley is like you never knew, kind of like he might be good this one game, but the next game he's not, and then he might be good for 2 games and he's not. So that's kind of the fear with Kenley, but yeah, I mean, like Dodgers don't technically have a closer. They've used Evan Phillips a bit as of late. And, I think Evan Phillips is their closer.
Yeah, I agree.
They're not going to admit that, but like if they don't have a reason, like they used Phillips in like the 5th the other day because they got into a hot situation.
Yeah,
but he's their guy that bails them out. And if the ninth inning is going to have that the heart of the order for the other team, you're going to see Phillips, and you're going to see Phillips whenever they're in trouble. So he's their main dude. So that's, to me, he's their closer.
I think what the Dodgers are trying to do is trying to erase the closer from Major League Baseball vocabulary. And then basically like what we're going to do, like Jorge said it, I think the reason why Kenley is no longer a Dodger is because the Dodgers lost trust in him. The Dodgers could not trust him anymore. Therefore, they could not justify paying him what he wanted to be paid. To me, I agree with you. The person that they trust the most in that bullpen right now is Evan Phillips. So they're going to use Evan Phillips in the most crucial part of the game. And sometimes the most crucial part of the game is going to come in the 5th. Maybe it'll come in the 7th, or they're going to come into the 8th. I'm curious if it's more of a psychological move where if we don't clearly name someone as a closer, we don't have to worry about, am I the closer? Who's the closer? Your job is just to get outs and do that. I mean, because I do think it's interesting that they haven't named a closer. And I have a feeling they're going to go throughout the whole season without a closer, and they're just going to play matchups. And if it works out, this is a copycat league. You're going to see other teams start doing the same thing. And I'm very curious to see what that's going to do to the closer. What is that going to do to the stat? I mean, we're talking now, Craig Kimbrell recently reached the 400 saves club. We might not see anybody else get 400 saves if we're going to start going to bullpen by committee. So this, I think what the Dodgers are doing right now is going to be a real test, because if they do have success, I do see other major league teams, and I think other major league teams have already tried this, but because the Dodgers have a higher profile and they copied them. I mean, is it a coincidence that the Boston Red Sox have signed so many former Dodgers? I mean, isn't it clear that the Red Sox are trying to follow the Dodgers model? Am I off base there, babyface?
I mean, obviously there's Dodgers have set like a model. Like, I think too, it's just also, when the Dodgers have won, right? Like, what's kind of the first thing you see in the offseason, right? A lot of their executives go to some other team, right? Or guys from their front office get hired to go somewhere else, right? And now as players are moving along, it's like, well, these guys won and they have a consistent track record. These guys have a winning formula of to play under. Hey, we like those guys on our team too, right? So that's kind of, I think, what we're seeing, with the Red Sox. Like, hey, we could get JT here, we could get Kenley, we have Kike, we have Alex Verdugo that have played in that winning formula. Let's bring those guys over here and see what happens, right? I think kind of that's kind of what we're seeing there.
Yeah, and in regards to his piece on Manny Mota, I think it's a great piece. I still do believe that guy has not gotten his due. When it comes to the Dodgers, it's always like Valenzuela, Koufax. There's certain guys that are clearly defined in Dodgers history. And I just never hear Mota spoken that in that same way. But if you look at his contributions to this organization, I mean, he played a huge role. The Dodgers were the first ones to open a camp in the Dominican Republic. And Manny Mota played a huge part in that. And, we may not see it now in terms of how many Dominican players are on the Dodgers, but the Dodgers played a huge role in that historically in the development of foreign baseball players. So I'm glad, and maybe I should just be like Jorge, look, just be happy that he got the recognition. It just feels to me that, whenever you talk the history of the Dodgers, I don't hear Manny Mota's name enough. Am I off base there, babyface?
No, I don't think you're off base. I mean, I think because part of it has to do with Manny when his time with the Dodgers, he was a pinch hitter, right?
Yeah.
And, I mean, like you said, he was an extraordinary pinch hitter, right?
304 lifetime hitter, dude. That's insane.
Yeah, to come off the bench, right, and to go out there and get a hit or a key hit when they need you to do it, that's insane, right? And I think that's why Manny Mota wasn't one of those guys like that had those big moments like Kirk Gibson, right, or Fernando, right? He was just one of those guys that just did his job. He went out there and when asked to do his job, he went out there and he produced, and that was Manny Mota. So I think that's why it kind of gets lost in there. But he was huge. Manny Mota was a huge part of the team, and what they've done outside of baseball, right? The stories that we hear about Manny Mota, like the type of person he is, it's crazy and I think that's why we put him on our shirt, right? Our Legends of Dodger shirt that we have. He's on there as well.
Yeah, our Latino Legends of Dodger Baseball, which is available at the Bleed Lows website. So you want any Bleed Lows podcast merch, make sure you go to that website. I want to wrap things up on this show only by saying this. I was very curious on his Bad Bunny take. But I love when our guests unveil their love of wrestling. And I know that some people like poo-poo wrestling and don't think wrestling. Look, wrestling played a huge part in people's lives, especially when they were younger, when they're kids. I think it's hilarious that his dad was like, you can't watch this shit anymore. And it was probably because Jorge ended up suplexing his brother through a coffee table or something and said, that's it. You guys aren't watching wrestling anymore. But I was in that memory. Do you remember when Shawn Michaels put Marty Jannetty through the window in the barbershop?
Yeah, I remember that. It still doesn't beat the Jimmy Snuka taking the coconut to the head from Roddy Piper. But yeah, that was one of those memorable moments.
Yes, we will always do wrestling talk on the Bleed Lows podcast because we're making it cool once again to like wrestling. I feel like there was a period of time there where wrestling wasn't cool, but we love living in nostalgia and talking about the old days. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Bleed Lows podcast. Make sure you guys are subscribed to our YouTube channel. Make sure you are subscribed to our podcast. Also, follow us on the social media. We're doing a giveaway. I don't think we've announced yet the winner, but every once in a while, we do giveaways on social media where we give out gear or we give out bobbleheads. We give out stuff so you follow the Bleed Lows podcast on Twitter. Follow the Bleed Lows podcast on Instagram. That way you'll get the latest news on upcoming guests, some of the stuff that we're doing at the stadium covering this team. So subscribe. You have homework assignments this week, okay? Subscribe to the podcast, the audio format. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Yo ha sido su servidor Juan Ramírez de parte de mi colega Babyface. Nos vemos para la próxima. This episode of the Bleed Lows podcast has been brought to you by betonline.ag, where the game starts.